The deep space salvage vessel Reclaimer drifted through the cold emptiness of uncharted space, its metal hull reflecting the distant light of dying stars. Commander Elias Vance sat alone in the bridge, his tired eyes scanning the endless darkness beyond the viewport. And his coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he did not care, because sleep was a luxury he rarely allowed himself these days. The ship's computer suddenly beeped with an alert that made Elias sit up straight in his chair, and the screen displayed coordinates for an anomalous distress beacon coming from a small moon called Kethros 7. "What do we have here?" Elias muttered to himself as he pulled up the scan data, and what he saw made his heart skip a beat, because the signal was ancient, using a frequency that had not been active for thousands of years. Protocol demanded that he report the signal to Galactic Command and wait for instructions, but Elias had never been good at following protocol when it came to mysteries like this. Lives might be at stake, so he made a decision that would change the course of history. "All hands, this is the commander," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We are changing course to investigate a distress signal, and I want everyone at their stations in 10 minutes. The Reclaimer was not a military vessel, and its crew of 15 was made up of engineers, salvage experts, and one very overworked medic. But they trusted their commander with their lives, and within minutes, the ship was speeding toward the mysterious moon. Kethros 7 was a barren rock covered in gray dust and sharp mountains, and as the Reclaimer descended through the thin atmosphere, Elias spotted the source of the distress signal, which was a crashed vessel of incredible beauty. The alien ship was made of something that looked like living crystal, with flowing curves and patterns that seemed to glow with inner light. But now it lay broken and shattered across the moon's surface, like a fallen star. "I have never seen anything like this," whispered Priya Singh, the weapons officer, as she stared at the wreckage on her screen. "The design matches nothing in our database." Elias grabbed his weapon and headed for the airlock, and he ordered a small team to follow him while the rest stayed behind to guard the ship, because something about this situation felt wrong in a way he could not explain. The surface of the moon was silent and still as Elias and his team approached the crystal vessel, and their boots left prints in the gray dust that had not been disturbed for who knows how long. When they reached the ship, Elias found a massive hole torn in its side, and the damage looked fresh, with scorch marks that suggested weapons fire from multiple angles. "Someone attacked this ship," said Marcus Webb, the chief engineer, his voice tight with concern. "And they did it recently, maybe only a few days ago," and activated his helmet light. And what he saw inside made him freeze in absolute shock, because there were creatures inside, massive creatures that should not exist. 7 enormous reptilian beings lay scattered across the broken floor of the ship, and each one was the size of a cargo shuttle, with scales that shimmered in colors Elias had never seen before. They had long necks and powerful bodies, with wing membranes folded against their sides, and their faces were noble and ancient, like something from the oldest legends of Earth. "Dragons," Elias breathed, unable to believe his own eyes. "They look like dragons." But he knew what they really were, because he had studied the old records during his academy days. And these creatures matched the description of the Drathan, an ancient species that the galaxy believed had gone extinct 10,000 years ago. 6 of the creatures were smaller, clearly juveniles, and they were covered in wounds that oozed dark blood, with their breathing shallow and weak as they clung to life. The 7th creature was much larger, an adult female whose scales had once been brilliant gold, but were now dull with pain and exhaustion, and she was positioned between her children and the entrance, using her broken body as a shield. When the Drathan mother saw Elias and his team, she lifted her massive head with obvious effort, and her golden eyes blazed with defiance and fear as she prepared to defend her children with her last breath. Elias understood her reaction, because he knew what the galaxy thought of humans, and every species in known space had heard stories about human persistence, human violence, and human unpredictability. The mother expected death, and she expected these strange two-legged creatures to finish what the attackers had started. But Elias had never been the kind of man who met expectations. He slowly lowered his weapon to the ground and raised his empty hands, showing her that he meant no harm, and then he spoke a single word into his communication device. Medbay. The Drathan mother watched in confusion as the human gave orders to his crew, and within minutes, more humans arrived with medical equipment and stretchers designed for large cargo. "We need to get them to the ship," Elias told his team, his voice calm but urgent. "They are injured, and they will die if we do not help them." His crew did not hesitate, even though they were facing creatures from legend, because their commander had given an order, and they trusted him completely. Moving the juveniles was difficult work, because each one weighed as much as a ground vehicle. But the humans worked together with determination, using anti-gravity lifters and pure muscle to carry the wounded creatures to the reclaimer. The mother was too large to move easily, and she was also too weak to walk on her own. So Elias sat beside her while his crew worked, and he talked to her in a soft voice, even though he knew she could not understand his words. "We are going to help you," he said, looking into her ancient golden eyes. "I do not know who attacked you or why, but you are safe now, and I promise that no one will hurt you or your children while I am alive." The Drathan mother stared at this strange human, who showed no fear and spoke with such gentle conviction, and something shifted in her expression, though Elias could not tell what it meant. When the juveniles were safely aboard the reclaimer, the crew returned for the mother, and it took every anti-gravity unit on the ship to lift her massive form. As they carried her through the airlock, the Drathan mother turned her head to look at the human commander one more time, and Elias thought he saw something that might have been wonder in her eyes. The galaxy had told her that humans were monsters, but this human had found her at her weakest moment, and instead of attacking, he had chosen to help. She did not understand why, and she was too weak to question it, but as darkness claimed her consciousness, she made a decision deep in her ancient heart. She would remember this human, and if she survived, she would find a way to repay his kindness, even if it took her the rest of her very long life. The reclaimer lifted off from Kethros 7 and set course for the nearest medical station, its cargo bay now filled with creatures that the galaxy had thought lost forever. Elias stood on the bridge and watched the moon shrink in the distance, and he wondered what he had gotten himself and his crew into. But he did not regret his decision for even a single moment. Because Elias Vance was human, and humans did not abandon those who needed help, no matter how strange or impossible the situation might seem. The medical bay of the reclaimer had never been designed to treat patients the size of shuttlecraft, but Dr. Yuki Tanaka had never been the type to let small problems like that stop her. She had converted the entire cargo hold into a temporary hospital, with makeshift beds created from cargo containers and emergency blankets, and monitoring equipment borrowed from every department on the ship. The 6 juvenile Drathan lay in a row, their massive bodies connected to machines that beeped and hummed with vital signs that Yuki did not fully understand. The mother, who was far too large for any bed, lay in the center of the hold, on a nest of thermal blankets, and her golden eyes followed Yuki's every movement with an intensity that would have frightened anyone else. "Okay, let us figure this out," Yuki muttered to herself as she studied the blood sample under her scanner. Silicon-laced blood, triple-chambered hearts, and an immune system that seems to attack every medication I try. She had not slept in 42 hours, and her eyes burned with exhaustion. But every time she considered resting, one of the juveniles would whimper in pain, and she would find new strength to keep working. The ship's database contained almost nothing useful about Drathan biology, because the species had been extinct for so long that most records had been lost or corrupted. But Yuki was resourceful, and she spent hours searching through ancient archives and forgotten research papers, piecing together fragments of information like a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. "Their blood needs to be warmer than I thought," she announced to her assistant, a young engineer named Chen, who had volunteered to help. "We need to raise the temperature in here by at least 10 degrees. Chen nodded and ran off to adjust the environmental controls, while Yuki moved to check on the smallest juvenile, a pale-scaled creature that the crew had started calling Ember. Ember was in the worst condition of all the juveniles, with deep wounds across her body and internal bleeding that Yuki could not stop with conventional methods. "Come on, little one," Yuki whispered as she prepared another experimental treatment. "You have to fight, and you have to stay with us." Across the room, Commander Elias entered the cargo hold and walked directly to Yuki's side. And his face showed the same exhaustion that everyone on the ship was feeling. "How are they doing?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. Yuki shook her head slowly. "The larger juveniles are stable for now, but their immune systems keep rejecting our treatments, and Ember is getting worse by the hour." Elias looked at the small dragon with sadness in his eyes, and then he looked at the mother, who was watching them with desperate hope. "What do you need?" Elias asked. "Tell me what you need, and I will make it happen." Laughed without any humor. "I need a miracle, Commander, because I am trying to save a species that no one has studied in 10,000 years, and I am running out of ideas." But even as she said the words, her mind was already working on new possibilities, because giving up was simply not something that Yuki Tanaka knew how to do. She pulled up the ancient Drathan texts on her tablet and read them again for the 100th time, and suddenly she noticed something she had missed before. "Wait," she said, her eyes growing wide. "The old records mention that Drathan blood has special properties, and it can bond with other species in ways we do not fully understand." Elias leaned closer. "What does that mean?" "It means," Yuki said with growing excitement, "that maybe we have been approaching this wrong, and instead of using our medications, we should be using their own biology to heal them." She rushed to the mother and knelt beside the massive creature, looking up into those ancient golden eyes. "I need your help," Yuki said slowly, hoping the Drathan could somehow understand. "I need some of your blood to help save your children." The mother stared at the human doctor for a long moment, and then she slowly extended her massive foreleg, offering her arm to this strange creature who was trying so hard to save her family. Yuki collected the blood sample with trembling hands, and she rushed back to her equipment to analyze it. What she found was incredible, and it changed everything she thought she knew about medicine. The mother's blood contained healing factors that were unlike anything in the Galactic medical database. And when Yuki synthesized a treatment using these factors, the results were immediate. The larger juveniles began to improve within hours, their wounds closing, and their vital signs growing stronger with each passing minute. But Ember was still fading, and even then, new treatment was not working fast enough to save her. "She has lost too much blood," Yuki said, her voice breaking with frustration. "Her body cannot produce enough new blood cells to replace what she lost." Elias stood beside her, watching the small dragon struggle to breathe, and he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Use my blood," he said. Yuki looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Commander, that is insane, and human blood is completely different from Drathan blood." "You said their blood can bond with other species," Elias replied, rolling up his sleeve, "so let us find out if that works both ways." It was a crazy idea, and it went against every principle of cross-species medicine. But Yuki had no other options, and Ember was dying. She set up the transfusion equipment and connected Elias to the small dragon, and she watched the monitors with her heart pounding in her chest. Minutes, nothing happened, and Yuki was sure she had made a fatal mistake. Then Ember's vital signs began to stabilize, and her breathing grew stronger, and the color began to return to her pale scales. "It is working," Yuki breathed in disbelief. Somehow, impossibly, it is working. But the crisis was not over, because Ember's heart suddenly stopped, and the monitor screamed with alarm. Yuki did not hesitate, and she grabbed the emergency resuscitation equipment and began working to bring the small dragon back. "Do not you dare give up," she shouted as she worked. "I did not come this far to lose you now." The crew gathered at the edges of the cargo hold, watching their doctor fight death itself with nothing but skill and determination. Once, twice, the small dragon slipped away, and twice Yuki brought her back, refusing to accept defeat, no matter how hopeless things seemed. On the third attempt, Ember's heart began beating on its own, and the small dragon took a deep breath and opened her eyes. The crew erupted in cheers, and even the larger juveniles lifted their heads and made sounds that might have been joy. But the most remarkable reaction came from the mother, who had watched everything from her place in the center of the hold. She had seen the human commander give his own blood to save her smallest child, and she had watched the human doctor fight with impossible determination to bring Ember back from death. These humans had no reason to help her family, and every species in the galaxy would have considered the Drathan too much trouble to save. But these strange creatures had worked without rest, sacrificed their own comfort and safety, and refused to give up, even when all hope seemed lost. The mother did not have words to express what she felt, so instead she lowered her massive head and pressed her snout gently against Yuki's hand. It was a gesture of gratitude that went beyond language, and Yuki understood it perfectly. "You are welcome," the doctor said softly, tears streaming down her exhausted face. "Now let us make sure all of your children get better." And so the work continued, with humans and dragons together in the cargo hold of a salvage ship, fighting against death and somehow winning. Because that was what humans did, and the mother was beginning to understand that perhaps the galaxy had been wrong about these strange and wonderful creatures all along. The Reclaimer had been traveling through deep space for 3 days when the sensors detected the approaching vessels, and Commander Elias knew immediately that trouble had found them. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls painted black and covered with the symbols of the Corvette Syndicate, the most ruthless slave traders in the known galaxy. "Red alert," Elias announced over the intercom, his voice calm despite the fear growing in his chest. "All hands to battle stations, and someone wake Dr. Tanaka, because we are about to have company." The Corvettes were known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty and their skill at hunting valuable prey, and they had clearly tracked the Drathan to this location. A communication signal came through, and Elias accepted it, to find himself looking at a scarred reptilian face with cold eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. "Human vessel," the Corvette commander growled. "I am Vreth of the Syndicate, and you have something that belongs to us." Elias leaned back in his chair, with a casual confidence he did not actually feel. "I have no idea what you are talking about, and I suggest you turn around and find someone else to bother." Vreth laughed, a harsh and unpleasant sound. "Do not play games with me, human, because we tracked our prey to that moon, and we know you took them, so hand over the Drathan, and we will let you live." In the cargo hold, the Drathan mother lifted her head in alarm, because she recognized the voice of the creature who had attacked her ship and killed her mate. The juveniles huddled closer to their mother, trembling with fear, and even Ember pressed herself against the massive golden form that had always protected her. Elias looked at the screen, and then turned to glance at the cargo hold feed, where he could see the terrified dragons and the crew members who had worked so hard to save them. "Let me be very clear," Elias said, turning back to face Vreth with steel in his eyes. "These dragons are under human protection, and any attempt to take them will be considered an act of war. Vreth seemed genuinely amused. You are one salvage ship with mining equipment, and I have 3 armed interceptors with plasma cannons, so please explain to me how you plan to stop us. Elias smiled. I guess you will just have to find out. He cut the communication and immediately began giving orders to his crew, his mind racing through tactical options that most commanders would consider insane. Marcus, I need you to overcharge the mining lasers and reroute power from every non-essential system, Elias commanded. The chief engineer's voice came back over the comm. Commander, the mining lasers are not designed for combat, and if we overcharge them, they might explode. Then make sure they do not explode, Elias replied. Priya, I want you on weapons control, and I need you to remember everything you learned in colony defense training. Priya Singh had been a pilot before she joined the salvage crew, and she had defended mining colonies from pirates more times than she could count. What is the plan, Commander? She asked as she took her position. Elias pulled up a map of the surrounding space and pointed to a nearby debris field. We are going to fly through that asteroid field, and we are going to use the rocks as cover while we pick them off one by one. That is crazy, Priya said, but she was already calculating trajectories. Those asteroids will tear us apart if we make one wrong move. Then we will not make any wrong moves, Elias replied with a grin. Now let us show these slavers what humans can do. The reclaimer dove toward the asteroid field with the 3 Corvette interceptors in pursuit, and the chase that followed would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Elias flew the ship like it was an extension of his own body, weaving between massive rocks and spinning through gaps that seemed too small for a vessel of their size. The Corvette tried to follow, but they were used to hunting in open space, and the asteroid field was like a maze designed by a madman. Now, Priya, Elias shouted as they passed behind a particularly large asteroid. Priya fired the overcharged mining lasers at the exact moment the first interceptor came around the rock, and the blast caught the enemy ship directly in its engine section. The interceptor exploded in a ball of fire, and debris scattered across the asteroid field like deadly confetti. One down, Priya announced, her voice tight with adrenaline. But the other 2 interceptors were more careful now, and they began working together to corner the reclaimer against a wall of floating rocks. Vreth's voice came over the communication system, filled with rage. You will pay for that, human, and I will make it. Sure, your death is slow. Elias ignored the threat and focused on the space around him, looking for any advantage he could find. He spotted a cluster of ice asteroids ahead, and an idea formed in his mind that was either brilliant or completely stupid. Marcus, can you vent plasma from the exhaust ports on my command? Elias asked. Yes, but why would you want to do that? The engineer replied in confusion. Just trust me, Elias said as he steered toward the ice cluster. The 2 interceptors followed, confident that they had the human ship trapped, and they did not notice the danger until it was too late. Now, Marcus, Elias shouted. Hot plasma vented from the reclaimer's exhaust ports and hit the ice asteroids, which instantly vaporized into a massive cloud of superheated steam. The second interceptor flew directly into the cloud and lost all visibility, and its pilot panicked and crashed into an asteroid at full speed. 2 down, Elias said with grim satisfaction. The third interceptor, commanded by Vreth himself, pulled back and tried to escape the asteroid field, but Priya was ready. She tracked the fleeing ship with the mining lasers and fired a precise shot that destroyed its hyperdrive, leaving it stranded and helpless. Do you want me to finish it? Priya asked, her finger hovering over the fire button. Elias thought for a moment and then shook his head. No, let him go and let him tell everyone what happened here. He opened a communication channel to the damaged interceptor. Vreth, this is Commander Elias Vance of the human vessel Reclaimer, and I want you to deliver a message for me. Vreth's scarred face appeared on screen, twisted with hatred and disbelief. Tell everyone you meet that the Draythan are under human protection, Elias continued. Tell them that any attack on these creatures will be answered with force, that the humans are not afraid of anyone. The communication ended, and the crippled interceptor limped away into the darkness of space, carrying a message that would spread across the galaxy. The Reclaimer emerged from the asteroid field, battered and scarred, with hull breaches in 3 sections and damage to almost every system. But the crew was alive, and the dragons were safe, and that was all that mattered. In the cargo hold, the Draythan mother had watched the battle on a screen that someone had set up for her, and she had seen everything. She had seen the humans risk their lives, fight against impossible odds, and refuse to surrender, even when defeat seemed certain. For the first time in her very long life, the ancient matriarch understood what true courage looked like, and she rose to her feet, despite her weakness. The humans had saved her family not once, but twice, and she knew that she could never repay such a debt with ordinary means. Gratitude. But she was a matriarch of the Draythan, and she had other ways to show her thanks. Ways that no outsider had ever experienced in the entire history of her ancient and noble species. The Reclaimer drifted through space while the crew worked to repair the damage from the battle, and in the cargo hold, something extraordinary was about to happen. The Draythan mother had grown stronger over the past week, and her wounds were healing thanks to the constant care of Dr. Tanaka and the human crew. Her name, the crew had finally learned through a translation program that Marcus had spent days creating, was Cyrathax. But she was not merely a Draythan mother, and the truth of her identity shocked everyone who heard it. She says she is a matriarch, Marcus announced to the gathered crew, reading from his translation device. The last matriarch of her bloodline, and these juveniles are the final generation of her family. Commander Elias looked at the massive golden dragon with new understanding. A matriarch is like a queen? The translation device processed Cyrathax's response. More than a queen, and more than a leader, because a matriarch carries the memories and wisdom of all who came before her. The crew exchanged amazed glances, because they had stumbled upon something far more important than they had realized. Cyrathax had been hiding from the galaxy for centuries, protecting her children in secret and searching for a way to restore her dying species. The Corveth had found her by accident, and they had attacked without mercy, killing her mate and nearly destroying everything she had worked to protect. "Why did you not fight back?" Priya asked. "The old stories say the Draythan were the most powerful warriors in the galaxy." The translation came slowly, filled with sadness. "We were powerful once, but our power made us arrogant, and we trusted no one. And in the end, we fell alone, with no allies to help us when our enemies united against us." Cyrathax looked at the humans with her ancient golden eyes. "We learned too late that strength without friendship is worthless. And by the time we understood, there were too few of us left to survive." The cargo hold fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of her words. A species that had once ruled the stars had been brought to extinction because they refused to trust anyone, and now only 7 remained. Cyrathax rose to her feet, and despite her injuries, she stood tall and magnificent, like a creature from the oldest dreams of humanity. "I wish to show you something," she said through the translator, "something that no outsider has ever seen." She called her children to her, and the 6 juveniles gathered around their mother in a circle, with Ember taking her place closest to Cyrathax's heart. The humans watched in wonder as Cyrathax began to sing. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, a melody that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space, and the air in the cargo hold began to shimmer with silver light. Cyrathax breathed, and instead of fire, silver light flowed from her mouth and filled the space around them. The light formed shapes, and the humans gasped as they realized they were seeing memories, actual memories, projected into the air like living holograms. They saw the Drathan homeworld, a planet of crystal mountains and silver seas, where thousands of dragons flew through skies painted with colors that had no names. They saw the great cities of the Drathan, structures of impossible beauty that floated among the clouds and sparkled like stars brought down to earth. They saw the wars that had destroyed it all, and the desperate flight of the survivors, and the long, lonely centuries of hiding and waiting. And they saw themselves, the crew of the Reclaimer, through Sirathax's eyes. They saw Elias lowering his weapon and offering help instead of harm. They saw Yuki working without sleep to save creatures she had never met. They saw Marcus giving Ember her name, talking to her gently when she was afraid. They saw Priya defending them against the Corveth with fierce determination. They saw themselves as Sirathax saw them, not as the monsters the galaxy feared, but as beings of incredible compassion and courage. The silver light faded, and Sirathax stood before them with tears streaming from her golden eyes. "You have done what no others would do," she said through the translator, her voice filled with emotion. "You have risked everything to save strangers, and you have asked for nothing in return." She stepped forward until she stood directly in front of Commander Elias, and she lowered her massive head until her eyes were level with his. "I offer you my bond," she said. The translation device beeped frantically as Marcus tried to understand what that meant, and when the explanation came, his face went pale. "Commander," Marcus said in a shaking voice, "a bond is the most sacred connection in Drathan culture, and it has not been offered to an outsider in 12,000 years, and it has never ever been offered to a non-Drathan." Elias looked up at the ancient matriarch. "What does it mean, exactly?" Sirathax answered directly. "It means that you would be connected to me and my children forever, and our minds would touch across any distance, and our fates would be joined until the end of time. It is the highest honor my people can give," she continued, "and I give it freely to you and your crew, because you have proven yourselves worthy in ways that no others have ever done." Yuki stepped forward with concern in her voice. "But Commander, we do not have the biology for something like that, and we do not know what it would do to a human." Sirathax made a sound that might have been laughter. "The bond is not limited by biology, little healer, because it is limited only by worthiness, and I have judged you all worthy." His crew, and he saw no fear in their faces, only wonder and determination. He turned back to Sirathax and nodded. "We accept your offer, but we do not accept it for reward or honor, and we accept it because we want to help you and your children, whatever that means." Sirathax pressed her forehead against Elias's chest, and something happened that no human had ever experienced before. Warmth spread through Elias's body, starting from his heart and flowing outward until it reached every part of his being. He felt a presence at the edge of his mind, ancient and powerful, but also gentle and kind, and he understood that he was feeling Sirathax herself. The same warmth touched each member of the crew, one by one, and they all felt the connection form. When it was done, Sirathax lifted her head and looked at the humans with eyes that now held something beyond gratitude. "You are Drathan now," she said. "Your fire is our fire, and our hearts are your hearts, and this bond will last for all the ages to come." Ember, the smallest juvenile, walked over to Elias and pressed her head against his leg, and he felt her emotions through the bond, love and safety and happiness. "Thank you," Elias said, his voice thick with feelings he could not quite describe. "We will do everything in our power to protect you and your children." Sirathax nodded slowly. "I know you will, because I can feel your heart now, and it is a good heart." The crew of the Reclaimer stood in the cargo hold, forever changed by an ancient ritual that had never before included outsiders. They were no longer just humans, and they were no longer just a salvage crew. They were bonded to the last Drathan matriarch and her children, and their fates were now intertwined with the future of an ancient species, and none of them would have had it any other way. The Reclaimer emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Galactic Council territory, its battered hull a testament to everything the crew had survived. 3 weeks had passed since the battle with the Corvette, and in that time, word had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The humans had saved the Drathan, and the humans had destroyed the Corvette hunters, and the humans had done the impossible once again. Commander Elias stood on the bridge and watched as a dozen Council patrol ships moved to intercept his vessel, and he knew that the hardest challenge was still ahead. Council Vessel Arbiter is requesting communication, reported his communications officer. Put them through, Elias said. A stern-faced alien appeared on the screen, his blue skin marked with the symbols of the Council Enforcement Division. Human Vessel Reclaimer, you are ordered to dock at Station Prime immediately, the alien announced. The Council has many questions about your recent activities, and several parties have filed claims regarding your cargo. Elias felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. We will dock as requested, but I want to be clear about something, and the beings on this ship are not cargo, and they are not property, and anyone who tries to treat them otherwise will answer to me. The alien looked surprised by the human's boldness, but he simply nodded and ended the transmission. Station Prime was the largest structure in Council space, a massive ring that orbited a dead star and housed the governments of 1,000 species. The Reclaimer docked at a port that had been cleared for their arrival, and Elias could see crowds of aliens gathering to watch through the station windows. Are you ready for this? Yuki asked as she joined him at the airlock. Elias shook his head. Not even a little bit, but we have come too far to turn back now. Preparing her children for their first appearance before the galaxy in 10,000 years. Through the bond, Elias could feel her nervousness, but he could also feel her determination and her trust in the humans who had saved her. The airlock opened, and Elias stepped onto Station Prime with his crew behind him, and the crowd fell silent in shock. Because walking beside the humans were 7 living Drathan, the last survivors of the species that everyone had believed extinct. Sirithax walked with her head held high, her golden scales gleaming under the station lights, and her children followed close behind her. Ember stayed close to Elias, and the small dragon's eyes darted nervously at all the strange aliens surrounding them. It is okay, Elias whispered to her through their bond, sending feelings of comfort and protection. No one will hurt you while I am here. The council chamber was enormous, a vast amphitheater where representatives from every major species in the galaxy gathered to govern their shared civilization. When Elias and the Drathan entered, the chamber erupted in chaos. Diplomats shouted questions, scientists demanded access to the specimens, and corporate representatives waived contracts and filed claims. Above it all, the Corvette ambassador screamed accusations, demanding that the humans be arrested for destroying syndicate vessels and stealing valuable property. Elias ignored the noise and walked to the central platform, where speakers addressed the council. He stood there, a single human surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and he waited for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, Elias spoke, and his voice carried to every corner of the vast room. I am Commander Elias Vance of the human vessel Reclaimer, and I am here to make a statement on behalf of humanity and our new allies. He gestured to Sirithax and her children, the last Drathan in existence, and they are not specimens, and they are not cargo, and they are not property. The Corvette ambassador rose to object, but Elias silenced him with a look. They are a family, Elias continued, a mother and her children, who were attacked by slavers and left to die on a barren moon, and my crew found them and saved them, and we will protect them." A council member spoke up. "The syndicate has filed legal claims, and the scientific community has research rights, and there are procedures that must be followed." Elias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let me be absolutely clear about something, because I want everyone in this chamber to understand." He looked around the vast room, meeting the eyes of species from 1,000 worlds. "These dragons are under the protection of the human race, and any attempt to harm, capture, or exploit them will be considered an act of war against humanity. And I promise you, that is not a war you want to fight." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Humans were known for their stubborn persistence and their refusal to back down from challenges, but no one had ever seen a single human threaten the entire Galactic Council. Before anyone could respond, Sirithak stepped forward, and the ancient matriarch addressed the assembled species in a voice that needed no translator. Her words resonated through the chamber, with power and wisdom accumulated over millennia. 10,000 years ago, my people ruled the stars and trusted no one," she said. "We believed that strength was all that mattered, and we fell alone, with no friends to help us when darkness came." She looked at the humans standing beside her. "But these beings found me at my weakest moment, when I had nothing to offer and everything to lose, and they chose to help. They gave their blood to save my children," she continued. "Protect us. And they asked for nothing in return, because that is simply who they are." Tears fell from her ancient golden eyes as she spoke her next words. "The humans have shown me what my people forgot long ago, that true strength is not in fire or in scales, but in the choice to protect those who cannot protect themselves." She turned to face Elias, and the bond between them pulsed with emotion. "I have given these humans my bond, the highest honor my people can bestow, and I have made them Drathan in spirit and in heart, because they have earned it through their actions." She addressed the council one final time. "You ask what the humans want, and I will tell you what they want, because I can see their hearts through our bond." "They want nothing for themselves," she said. "They want only to help us survive and rebuild, and they want to stand beside us as allies and as family. That is the gratitude of the Drathan matriarch," she concluded. "Not gold, not power, not favors, but kinship, forever and always." The chamber was silent, and then slowly applause began. It started with a single delegate, then spread until the entire council was on its feet, honoring the humans and the dragons they had saved. The Corveth ambassador sat down in defeat, knowing that his claims meant nothing against the weight of such testimony. Ember, the smallest Drathan, crawled forward and curled around Elias's legs, purring with a sound like distant thunder. The commander knelt down and wrapped his arms around the small dragon, and through their bond, he felt pure love and perfect trust. And across the galaxy, the message spread through news channels and communication networks, telling the story that would be remembered for generations. The humans saved the dragons, and the dragons made the humans family. It was the beginning of a new alliance that would change the galaxy forever, because when humans and dragons stood together, nothing in the universe could stand against them. The crew of the Reclaimer returned to their ship as heroes, but Elias knew that their adventure was just beginning. Because Sirithak had a secret, a hidden purpose that had driven her journey across the stars. She had been searching for the lost Drathan homeworld, where thousands of preserved eggs waited for someone to wake them. And now she had found the perfect allies to help her. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear, and that was that humanity and the Drathan would face it together, as family, forever.